We're going to continue on in the Matthew I Never Knew, all right? And so we are on, we've been going through this for a while, all right? And so today I'm going to talk about the thing that I started on Wednesday about friendships, relationships, and then just that was the kind of the positive. And now I'm going to go to okay, well, what do you do when it's not so good? Okay, so we want to get close to people. And we want to become, like I said, level 5 friends. And that works when things are going really smoothly. But often what happens is the issues, they arise and there's conflict and sometimes even criticism. And right here. Want to get close, but there's conflict and criticism, okay? But by the end of this message, I hope you can learn how to navigate those conversations biblically so that you might actually even get closer through those conversations. It's interesting, there's difficulty, but maybe that's the way in which you can actually get closer to people. And so to do that, we're going to look at Jesus's advice on conflict, Matthew 18. Let's read this together, okay? Ready and go. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take 1 or 2 others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Again, I say to you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I among them. Okay, so before we get to the meat behind the principles here, I want to start out in verse 18 and just point out this language of bind on earth, bound in heaven, loose on earth, loosed in heaven. So it's in the context of this relational advice that he gives to his followers. But Jesus, he mentions this connection between what you do on earth and what happens in heaven. And I think this shows a picture of the church as the intersection between heaven and earth. There's a correlation there, okay? That is a really high calling regarding what we're supposed to be as the church. I think that there is a critical place of that unity, that's what we're talking about, within the Christian community. Okay, so in John chapter 17, this is Jesus' high priestly prayer. Before he gets crucified, he prays this prayer for his disciples. And what is his prayer? His prayer is that they may all be one, just as you, Father, are in me and I in you. Okay? So he's praying that they would be so unified that their relationship would be like Jesus' relationship with God. So in other words, our unity is to reflect the unity between 2 parts of the Trinity. That's how close we're supposed to be. And that is what is going to cause a watching world to go, oh, whoa, that's weird. That, I don't see that. That's so powerful. That's from God. So that the world may believe that you have sent me, so that the world may know that you sent me and love me. Radical unity can demonstrate divine power. Just quick example, Shelley, when she was a freshman, she was kind of looking through all the Flickr pictures. Hey, what group should I join? And then I just remember she saw only our Flickr was multicultural. Everything else was kind of just same ethnic groups. And she's like, oh, that's interesting. When you don't see that, it's kind of strange, right? In what other context would 2 Koreans, an Indian, a Mexican, a Filipino, and a Russian-speaking Chinese person call each other brothers? Does that ever happen anywhere else? Matthew 18, okay, going back there, verse 19, again I say to you, if 2 of you agree on earth, verse 24, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I among them. So God is present when we're together and unified. It's like God is present in the synergistic bonds between us. Like, because there's a lot of talk about, oh yeah, God's in me, the individualistic mindset. He's in me. But maybe between me and Kevin, right? Where is God? God's like the more powerful we have, and it's Chem, right? Like the more like bonds there are, like God exists there. If I'm solo, he's not there. Or maybe he's like in a weaker. Anyways, this is not meant to be like theology. This is just kind of like I'm trying to understand where is God and how does that work, okay? The thing, though, is we encounter that it is easy for disagreements to happen, even in the closest relationships. So you think about like companies and like friendships or like music groups. It is so easy for disagreements to happen. I was trying to look up like, are there any like famous, well-known like breakups for like bands and stuff? Like, and I'm just so like out of it, and like I just thought, the Beatles or In Sync, and like I don't know if you know like a better one, but it's easy for disagreements to happen. Things fizzle, like your friend, right? I don't know if even between like high school and now, there's been that kind of dynamic. And so even in the church, right? History has gone the way of like schisms. You look at church history and denominational differences. So the critical question that we're trying to tackle is how are we to deal with relational rifts within the church? Okay, so let's examine the normal ways in which people deal with conflict, okay? I think some of the normal ways are people just, they do nothing, right? They allow the rift to just be there. And we talked about this on Good Friday, that, that chasm. We allow that to be there and maybe grow wider and wider until there's like a breaking point and then the relationship is just over. It severs. That's one way. Another way, you go to go to wherever, social media or something, and you just vent. You vent there. Or you vent to a friend or something like that. It's really easy these days. Go on Reddit, other forums, and like there's people who are just waiting to hear the venting. Like they enjoy that stuff and leave a review, whatever it is. That's another way. Third way, you just hold it in. You try to act magnanimous, okay? But actually inside there's a little cloud of like turmoil, something's brewing, stewing, something toxic, something that you left in your closet. It's not good, right? So typical ways, right? It's we get cold, we get spicy, or we get bitter, and when they explode, okay? So why? Why do we do that? I think some reasons are like we're just really awkward, right? Who here has a hard time bringing up negative truth, confronting people? Like, I'd rather not do that, okay? Who here's, yeah, that's the majority of people here. And then the rest of you guys, yeah, all right. Type 8, yeah. So a lot of times we just don't know what to say. Like, oh, I know I need to bring this up. What do I say? How do I say it? What are the exact words? And we don't want to rock the boat. And a lot of us we want that false sense of peace, right? And so that's one reason. Another reason is we're just like so full of like anger, malice, or maybe that's not how you experience it. Maybe it's just you experience it as hurt, that we're unable to just be straight and objective. So we're full of that turmoil, that emotion. So what's a lot easier to do is it's easier to ghost, right? We cut off the relationship with someone else. We just don't even confront. We stop the texts, the calls, we ignore, we disappear. And we're willing to like get help with that. And so I have an example, but it's so dated. It's from 2015. There was a breakup service where people, they're so avoidant that they hire people to help them break up with other people. But like when I said this back then, it was like so shocking. But now it's like, I could see why people would do that. It's kind of become part of the culture. Not as shocking these days. So like what's one way to kind of apply? I think for many of us, Christian forgiveness, it's often just a way of spiritualizing all the typical ways of dealing with conflict, okay? And we say, as Christians, we're supposed to say, I forgive you. God forgave me, I should forgive you. But let's just say, okay, hypothetical example, someone leaves dirty socks on your side of the room, okay? Like, how do you feel? Each time you see the sock, say, I forgive you. But what if we don't really know how to forgive? What if what we say by I forgive you means something kind of different, right? Maybe you're just acting the part of forgiveness on the outside by not bringing anything up, but internally, stuff it might be happening. So you might be saying that, okay, I forgive that person, but all this other stuff is happening. Like, I don't know, you experience random bursts of anger towards that person. Or like, you become very like petty and impulsive. And you're like, okay, why? And maybe it's not even just towards that person, just towards people around you in general. Maybe you feel the need to make the other person understand your pain, and that comes out in a certain mean tone that you have towards that person. Think a lot of critical thoughts, right? They just start coming. Every time you sit down and you think, oh, they just start coming, so you try to distract yourself and not think about those things. Or you just feel annoyed whenever you see the other person. Maybe you have a lot of blame towards others for your feelings. And I think all of these are signs that you're not actually forgiving that person, right? Because if you actually forgave them, this wouldn't be there. And I think the other problem is that it might actually be a false forgiveness. Like, maybe you're wrong. Maybe actually it wasn't that person's socks. Maybe it was yours and you forgot. Or like it was your friends who came over and they just left them there and you just assumed that it was your roommate's. And your roommate is there going like, the heck, why is he leaving his socks on my side of the room? So I don't know. Or more, maybe more likely it's just that it actually did happen, but maybe your heart is just so small that this little event that you don't want to bring up, it's just occupying your heart. And you're so bothered by other people and what they do that you're just totally blind to your dark presence. So it is like this, right? You are like that. And that's how you are in a lot of your relationships. You're like upset, you're critical, judgmental, and this is where you need friends, where you probably want to do this in about a group of 5 to 8 people, and you want to do it in the midst of other fun prompts like, hey, who's the most bubbly and who's the most dark, and then everyone will go and hope maybe it'll point it at you, and you're like, I did not know that. I did not know that I was like Darth Vader, having these huge expectations for other people. So before we go on, just want you to kind of identify for yourself and think about what is your default way of dealing with conflict. So I wonder if maybe this is something that you guys can either write about, identify, or like kind of just talk about with other people. These are some of the ways I default to it. And then, if you're brave enough, what's your sock? Okay, metaphorically speaking. What's that thing that you're kind of annoyed about, right? So give you guys a couple minutes to talk, or if you want to just say to the person next to you, hey, I just need to write a little bit. You could do that too. Okay, give you guys a few minutes to do that. Go for it. So we all have our socks, okay? We all have our socks, and I think whether you're comfortable with talking about it right now or not, I think it's important that we learn how to deal with them. Okay, they're there, and they kind of we get caught up on it, and we have to know how to move forward. Okay, so moving on, what is the dark side of not get it? What's the dark side of not reconciling? Okay, well, I think let's talk about some of the negative effects. Okay, so first of all, there's a negative effect on the person who is like gossiping. Let's say, okay. One negative effect is you end up becoming this polluted, dark person, like Darth Vader, that no one wants to be around, okay? And I think one piece of advice that one of the commentaries on this passage gave is, if you feel that someone has wronged you, you should immediately put your complaint into words. The worst thing that you could do about a wrong is to brood about it. That is fatal. And man, I've taken that advice many times where I get kind of lost in my like thoughts and emotions, and then all I do is I just write. Either sometimes I write an email, sometimes it's to that person or it's to someone else, kind of like telling on the person. That's not good, right? But I write it, and after I write it, I kind of feel better, and I don't recommend sending that. That's actually just for myself to get it all out there. Sometimes I'll just kind of write separately if you're able to be that self-aware. Um, so what it can do if you don't do this, it can poison your mind and your life until you can think about nothing else but your sense of personal injury. So what kind of happens is you become a sock, all right? That's your whole mind. It keeps popping up. It consumes more and more of you, and your brain space is taken up by that. So what you should do is bring those feelings out into the open, and then you should face it and state it. And often the very stating of it, sometimes in that written form, it can reveal how unimportant and trivial that whole sock thing is. Now, if we just vent either through like text or social media or like something like that, even email, yeah, it's different from if we actually talk to someone person to person. Okay, so there's a difference between the text like form of communication and then face to face. Sometimes we type things that we would never say in person. I don't know if you've had that experience, or you type and then you like the person shows up and you think about, oh, I don't think I want to say this anymore. All right, that's a good thing. Okay, so there are a lot of keyboard warriors out there who would never say the things they type in person, or they would never say it out loud, because something about typing, what it does is it strips that context of flesh and blood, of an actual person. It kind of dehumanizes ever so slightly. And otherwise, they would respond to you face to face. Even in the midst of what you're about to say, you just see subtly the shift in their shoulders or like just their eyebrows, and you're like, ooh, I should stop. I don't want to actually say this. It actually hurt the other person, all right? So texts, they can be misread. They can be misunderstood. It might unconsciously convey a tone that you never intended to communicate. And if you have a difference with someone, best way, if possible, it is face-to-face, right? So, and what if you're wrong, like in the sock example? So there might be other factors, that you might not be considering, but you get kind of zoned in on that sock. Like what if your roommate they're going through a tough time? They didn't do so well in their finals. Their parents are going through something tough family issues. And they're thinking about, oh, maybe I need to take a leave of absence. I don't know. Like, so you need to, when you go face to face, you're able to actually figure those things out better. Okay, so that's negative effects on the person who would be like potentially gossiping or speaking these things. Negative effect on the hearer, the person listening, okay? So when you hear people's like share their burdens, right? How's that feel? Feels burdensome, right? Just picture this burden and, hey, can you help me carry this for a little bit? Here's a few bricks, carry that, okay? It could be like a difficulty, just school's really tough, right? It could be a sin. I've been struggling in this way. It could be a grievance that person has towards someone else. We have a hard time handling the burdens of other people, and it can actually burden or darken the hearer. So just another passage, Galatians 6, gives us some wisdom on that. So here's some principles to keep in tension. Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Verse 4, but let each one test his own work, and then his reason to boast will be in himself alone and not in his neighbor, for each will have to bear his own load. So really quickly, just some lessons we can learn from this. There's like this personal responsibility that I think, like you have to take personal responsibility for your burdens. So it says in verse 1, keep watch on yourself, and then bear your own load, okay? And you got to test your own work. So verse 5, bear his own load. Verse 4, test his own work. There's a personal responsibility for your burden. So like don't be quick to, I know some people are guilty of this. They just want, here, take this. Just throw it at the other person, all right? That's not, there's a personal responsibility there. There's also a responsibility for the other person's burden. If you're in the church and if you care, there is that as well. And so we're supposed to bear one another's burdens, verse 2, because that's what Christ did. Okay, so that's also true, but they're in tension, right? Third tension, spiritual maturity exists. You who are spiritual, so not everyone can bear everything. You don't want to tell your, young, brother or sister, 5-year-old, all your burdens about school. It won't work, right? Like, what? So there are those who are more spiritual who do the work of restoring people caught in sin. Why? That's what it talks about. You who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness if anyone is caught in any transgression. Why? Because people who are in sin are in some heavy stuff. And the hearer, when they hear that, they might become tempted by that heavy stuff. It might kind of cause them to, they don't know how to process all of that. Or that hearer might be kind of darkened, overburdened. And so the person helping needs to be more spiritual so that they can bear more burdens. As to how you apply these 3 principles, it's a wisdom issue. In regards to wisdom issues, it's context specific. So you actually need to kind of talk about it and see different situations. I'm not sure what I should do here. Which principle should I hold higher because they're in tension with each other, okay? So that's one of the negative effects on the hearer, okay? The other negative effect is triangulation, okay? You become a victim of triangulation. Triangulation, anyone familiar with that term? It's a psych term. It's also like is it physics or math term, right? So you the triangle, you locate the center through the other points, right? But in terms of, this is a psych terminology that's being used here. It's when a person with a conflict with someone else, instead of dealing with that conflict between me and Kevin, we bring someone else in, okay? And usually there is limited or no communication between the 2 triangulated people. So let's just, so Banwan, right? So me and Kevin have beef, triangulate Banwan, and usually it's not all 3 of us talking to each other. So it's just through me. So I talk to Banwan, interact a little bit here, okay? And there's limit, and they don't talk to each other. So it's kind of a divide and conquer strategy for me, in which I can play people against each other. So oh yeah, these praise leaders. I don't know about Kevin's praise leading on one. I doubt him. How do you feel? He's like, yeah, I've been meaning to want to lead praise. So throw some shade on him through some kind of interaction, things like that. And so then what happens to Banwan, right? Let's say I say, yeah, Kevin, this Filipino style, I don't know, I don't like that, and need some more true Asian, Korean style of praise leading. And yeah, he's always singing with his wife, Dana. What is that about? There's some favoritism there, right? Favoritism. And Banwan, his view of Kevin is now polluted. It's tainted. He needs to figure out, if he's not going to be a victim of triangulation, he needs to go to Kevin and go why did Josh mention all these things? It doesn't really make sense. I don't know how to process this. Is there something going on, right? So why would I do that? The person who is triangulating, I think it's to remain in control. Because we've got beef, and maybe it's about, I don't know, something else entirely, right? And then so I triangulate in order to, because I'm not willing to bring up that beef with Kevin. I'd rather do this other thing. It's a really effective strategy to gain the advantage over people by throwing shade on them, okay? So this is what a lot of internet forums and just gossip, comments, Reddit, it's all about that. Full of this kind of stuff. You see it all the time, right? So if you've ever read or heard a negative comment about someone and you didn't disconfirm it, get at the truth, you have just been a victim of triangulation. Your view of that person has been permanently tainted. You got to get at the truth. Okay, so there's that negative effect. Okay, now what's the negative effect on the targeted person, on the person who we're talking about? They're helpless. People are talking about them behind their back. They can't verify or disconfirm. Like, I'm just having this conversation with Bonwan, and Kevin's like just up there having a good time leading praise, and he doesn't know I'm giving him like looks or thinking these thoughts. He's absolutely clueless and oblivious to what is now how I'm damaging Bonwan and my view of him that is like growing more and more negative. And it just made to look bad, and he doesn't know why I suddenly avoid him, right? I kind of move away from him. And all of these like supposed friends, right? Let's say I talk to not just Bonwan, but Nathan and just all these supposed friends who now have a negative view of Kevin, who are not willing to bring up the issues that, me too, I'm not willing to bring up that issue with Kevin either. It's kind of like, would you leave your friend with a ketchup stain on their face or like TP hanging out, right? Like, you're just going to leave them and not bring that up? Like, what kind of friend are you? And yet, we do this relationally all the time. This has a negative effect on the church because we're called to be brothers and sisters. But it's ugly when there is that kind of gossip or slander and backtalk without being straight. So the Corinthian church, they did that. They aired out all their differences and they had lawsuits in public. They took it's like Judge Judy. That's what they were doing that, okay? And Apostle Paul's like, shouldn't you figure that out within the church? Aren't you supposed to be that close? And we're going to be studying the 1 Corinthians starting next week, okay? We'll be doing brief commercial break. We're talking about Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, and we'll be mixing it up between 1 Corinthians and Matthew. And we study 1 Corinthians. It'll be a little bit more like the serious study Sundays, except not as long, okay? But we're going to just get deep dive into 1 Corinthians. I think there's a lot for us to learn there, different so we'll have the tables and the texts, and you guys will kind of mark it up and study, okay? So that's what's happening next week, okay? But we'll continue to come back to Matthew every so often, and Kevin, who I actually do love when he leads praise, him and others will have some very nice praise times and things like that. Anyways, and we'll have a chance to share. I think hopefully we'll hear more testimony. So those will be the share Sundays versus the serious Sundays. Not that the share Sundays are not serious, but anyways, you guys get it. So coming back to this, okay, like when this happens in the church, it's really disturbing. And the problem with ghosting is if you ghost people, you become relationally dead, okay? You're cutting people off. That's bad for you. That's bad for the church. You're not the only one who's like dying. It affects those relationships. It's hard to relate to dead people. And you can notice it. Oh, hey, you're kind of distant, okay? All right, give you some space, but man, I would like to get close. So what should we do? Matthew 18. Here's the text, okay? I'm going to walk through it and give you guys a chance to process. We have to go, okay? Go, take the initiative. That's what it means. The person in the clear is not to wait for the sinner, the offending person, to come to him, but you're supposed to, hey, go to that person, okay? And then we have to be direct. Tell him his fault, okay? Tell him his fault. And go directly to that person. And I think people have a hard time with this because they think it's just too confrontational. But like, wouldn't you rather someone be direct with you rather than like, oh, hey, you don't look so good today. Something about you that doesn't look good on your body versus, hey, you have ketchup on your face, right? Like, so quick practice. I think this is worth it. 30 seconds, okay? Practice being direct versus indirect to the person next to you. Let's have that context. I was going to have this be like, give them feedback on something more like their breath or something, but let's not do that. Let's not go there. Hypothetically, let's just talk about, okay, socks, okay? So how would you be direct about that whole sock situation? Okay, practice, each person go. All right, if you haven't switched, hurry, go. Okay, I wanna hear some of these conversations later. Some of you guys are having too much fun with this. So just who has a hard time with this being direct thing? Just kind of okay. Yeah, so it's if you could just identify what it is, and I think with socks is a little bit clearer, but a lot of times it's not so clear and objective, right? It's like figuring out what the words are to say. But let's practice. Let's get better at this because I think the other person would appreciate that rather than the kind of vague tiptoeing around. Um, what happens? What's the goal though? The goal is not that you are right and you make the other person feel bad, but it's to gain your brother. It's to gain a family member back. It's to reconcile. That's the goal. That's why you do it, okay? So I know that it's hard to get your emotions get into it, but this is the goal. Now, if they don't listen, you're supposed to escalate when necessary. And how do you escalate? If he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, right? Notice that it's a gradual escalation. It's not like immediate boom. It's like, okay, what's the minimum amount of people who need to be there to kind of help? Because I still have this tension. It didn't work out. Me and Kevin talked, and we need to bring in one other person maybe, okay? Let's start there. And then if he listens, then I've gained the brother. But then if not, then okay, we have to keep going. The point is that it's to get to the truth. So every charge may be established by the evidence of two or three witnesses. So it's based on truth. And sometimes to get that truth, you need to bring in more people. And that's hard because sometimes the evidence is often perceptions or how you felt about something. But then if someone still refuses, I just want to go to if you escalate it to the most, it's supposed to, you have to tell it to the church. So listen to what Jesus say. You're supposed to like talk about it in public. You're supposed to talk about it like, hey, Kevin did this, whatever, right? And they're supposed to let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. If he still refuses to listen, what does it mean to be a Gentile or tax collector? It's to not be part of the church. That's what Jesus is saying. So who does this? Who does the Matthew 18 principles? Like, who cares enough about people to go through with all of this and sit down with the other person, confront the facts, work out grievances until there's reconciliation? If you think about it, it's actually a beautiful picture. It's people who are committed to each other. Where do you see that? Man, like maybe only the most mature married people, right? These days, people don't even do that. Divorce rates are high, right? And I've been sharing a lot about my friend Yang in negative ways, but just positive way, okay? He is that mature person because I cared about him, he cared about me. And so one of my peers, Yang, right? And so because he was that, we're able to speak truth with each other and actually get closer through the process. If you think about it, this is what it takes to get closer, right? Your family, siblings, parents, you have to work through tension, but then you have that bond through blood. The church is meant to form these kinds of bonds, and that only comes through working through tension. And that's really hard, okay, to deal with all of this. So there's more to, I'm going to skip a little bit, okay, because I've been going a little bit long, but this is based on what's in the Old Testament too, Leviticus 19:17. You shall not hate your brother in your heart, but you shall reason frankly with your brother, lest you incur sin because of him. So God envisioned his people to be this close to deal with that stuff. And why be that close? Because he envisioned them to be a family on mission to bless the world and show them what he was like. And he envisioned that actually in the Old Testament too, and now in the New Testament version, the church. So what does all this require? It requires courage rather than being cowardly in those situations to bring that up. It requires a commitment to each other. I'm there for you. Even though some of the things, you guys are so gracious, you said I could speak truth, but I'm committed to you guys. And I know that's like a nice way of saying I'm kind of pointed and blunt sometimes, right? And I know that it's not good to be on the receiving end sometimes, but it is true. I am committed. right? And I'm working on just as nicely as I could put things so that it wouldn't ruin the relationship. But it's true. I want to be this, okay? And it also requires a submission to, I think, the authority of like the church to speak into our lives. Because God has a high view of the church, and that requires a lot of trust. And that's not our modern church today. People don't trust institutions. So, man, these days, if someone is like corrected, receives feedback, or disciplined, all you have to do is just leave this church, go to another. Go to one where people don't actually ask about the issues and they accept them with no questions asked. What does that mean when you say you accept them? It just means I don't want to know your life and your issues. That's acceptance. So in the early church, that couldn't happen. There was only one church in Corinth, in Riverside. So if you decide, oh, I'm not going to be here, like, you're not going to be part of church. And that would actually force you to, oh, okay, maybe I am wrong. You can't run away from relationships. There is a commitment. Think about how the folly of that. You get a bad grade in mechanical engineering, and it's like your structural integrity test, and then, so back, like these, I don't know, it's like, imagine you have the power to just change professors. I don't like the C- you gave me. I'm going to get another professor. Well, I'll find one who will give me an A for this, right? Regardless of what the truth is. And that's kind of what the current society is like. So what commitment does is it forces people to face their inadequacies or their sin and actually deal with it and actually repent. And what Jesus is saying essentially is if anyone sins against you, spare no effort to fix that. We're committed to each other. We want to get things right again. Don't tolerate any situation in which there's just any kind of breach of personal relationship. Okay? That's what it takes to form Christian community. So I had these like discussion questions, but I trust that you guys just are like kind of getting this, and you could just, if you have any questions about this, this is the passage. This is the text to go to. I just want to give you some final exhortations, okay? So a warning to the gossiper. 1 John 3:15, everyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in him. Anger is a really foolish thing. It makes us destroyers instead of builders, and it robs us of our freedom, makes us prisoner. All you can think about is that sock. You almost become that sock. And to hate someone is to commit murder in our hearts. So I think let's be builders and not destroyers, okay? God is present in the synergistic bonds between us. We have to really work on this. And it's true, there's no greater love than, man, when a bunch of single guys, they're that close, people are like, that's amazing. And they stay together for like not just a couple years, but like decades. You're like, I want that. So that radical unity, it can demonstrate divine power, especially when there's conflict and there's forgiveness that gets involved. So I just want to end with this story. When we were in Guatemala, we heard this from the two the missionary lead couple, Kim and Lynn, and they hosted all of these different mission groups, Asian leaders, okay, leaders from all parts of Asia, and there was this time when all these Asian leaders, they're in that same space, and they just started talking about their different grievances. They started talking about grievances that they had towards Japan, what Japan did to them during World War II. And this Japanese leader, she kind of just took it all. She was listening to it. She was almost like, because she didn't do it necessarily, but then she's like, yeah, oh man, my people, I can't believe we did this. And she was just crying and just kind of taking all that on. And the missionary couple, they said something interesting. They said, and then actually all these Asian leaders, people in China, just Southeast Asia, and then they were just giving it to her. Almost like, and I don't quite, I wasn't there, but he said like, it was almost like they were representing all the different grievances. and they were just, and Kim wanted to just, whoa, why are you being, it wasn't her. But they were just doing all that, and she was taking it all on. And then at the end of it, they said, "If you." And there was power in that forgiveness. And man, it's sad because that's not something that the rest of the Japanese government has actually embraced or done. But through the church, there was able to be this kind of reconciliation, bond, even between those church leaders there, where they're able to experience and give that radical forgiveness. That's how people are able to see something that they've never been able to see on earth. That's when the divine can be revealed, when there's that kind of powerful forgiveness. That's what we've got to aim for. That's what we have to go for. And so let's really resolve to move closer to each other, to do more of that. I'm just going to give you a time to kind of think about some of these things. And here, kind of open-ended, right? What did you hear? What did you agree with? What do you disagree with? What are you confused by? One thing that I just want to put out there for myself is, and myself and Jackie, is that we're open to kind of talking about things, actually. And if there's things that you're like, oh, I'm not sure about this, you could always come to office hours, which I know sometimes it's intimidating, right, to do that. So if there's an easier way, like, yeah, just, talk to us. But definitely know my heart and Jackie's heart and our heart is that we would actually be committed and grow closer. So whatever would prevent that, do that. So I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to just process in this way, okay? And then after that, we'll sing a song to close it out.